My name is Grace. I am 28 years old, and I live in a quiet apartment in the city. I was sitting on my couch, holding a warm cup of coffee, when the lock clicked. I hadn't given anyone a key recently, but my mother never needed permission to ruin my peace. The door swung open, banging hard against the wall. There she stood, breathless and beaming, dragging two large pink suitcases behind her. My younger sister, Chloe, trailed behind her, looking around my living room like she was shopping for furniture. My mother didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She just clapped her hands together and pointed at Chloe. "Sweetheart," she announced, her voice echoing in the small space. "Meet the new owner of your apartment." Chloe smirked. It was that same look of entitlement I had seen since we were children. She walked past me, dropped her bag on my clean rug, and started touching my things. My heart hammered in my chest, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just took a sip of my coffee and hid a small smile behind the mug. Because my mother and sister had made a fatal mistake. They thought I was the same pushover daughter they had used for years. They didn't know what I had signed last night. But before I tell you how everything flipped like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Grace. I am 28 years old. If you looked at my life on paper, you would think I was successful. I have a job I worked hard to get. I have a savings account. I have an apartment in the city that smells like vanilla and old books. But to my family, I am not Grace the successful woman. I am Grace the utility. I am like the spare tire in the trunk of a car. You don't think about the spare tire when you are driving down the highway with the music blasting. You don't polish the spare tire. You don't take pictures of it. You only remember it exists when something goes wrong. When you have a flat. When you are stranded on the side of the road in the rain. Then you value the spare tire. But the moment the car is fixed, you throw the tire back in the dark trunk and forget it exists. That is my role. I have a sister named Chloe. She is 4 years younger than me. Chloe is the sports car. She is bright, loud, and expensive. My parents love the sports car. They spend all their time polishing her, showing her off, and worrying about her paint job. My mother always says, "Grace, you are so strong, you are so responsible." For years, I thought that was a compliment. I thought it meant she was proud of me, but I was wrong. Responsible wasn't a compliment. It was a job description. It meant that I didn't need care. It meant I didn't need love. It meant that my resources were available for them to harvest whenever they wanted. I remember when I was 24. I was working 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop in the morning and one as a junior designer in the afternoon. I was exhausted. My shoes had holes in the soles, so when it rained, my socks got wet. I didn't buy new shoes because I was saving every penny for a deposit on an apartment. One night, my phone rang at 11 p.m. It was my mother. She was crying. "Grace," she sobbed. "You have to help. Chloe is in trouble." My heart stopped. I thought Chloe was in the hospital. I thought she was hurt. "What happened?" I asked, grabbing my keys, ready to run out the door. "She put her car in a ditch," my mother said. "She's fine, thank God. But the tow truck driver wants $300 cash to pull it out, or he's going to report it to the police." She had a little too much to drink, Grace. She can't have a police record. It will ruin her future. "I'm barely making rent, Mom," I said quietly. "Please," my mother begged. "You have savings, I know you do. You are always so good with money. Don't you love your sister? Do you want her to go to jail?" That was the weapon they always used. Guilt. If I said no, I wasn't just being stingy, I was being a bad sister. I was being the villain. So I drove out in the rain. I paid the man. Chloe didn't even say thank you. She was sitting in the passenger seat of my mom's car, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. When I handed the money over, my mother hugged Chloe, not me. "Oh, my poor baby," she cooed to Chloe. "You must have been so scared." I stood there in my wet socks, $300 poorer, invisible. That became the pattern of my life, the bank of grace, the service of grace. I helped them pay for a new water heater when theirs broke. I edited Chloe's college essays because she didn't have the patience to write them. I drove my father to his physical therapy appointments for 6 weeks because my mother couldn't handle the traffic. I did all of this because I thought that if I was useful enough, eventually, they would love me. I thought that if I paid enough into the family account, one day I could make a withdrawal. But family doesn't work like a bank. The apartment I live in now is the only thing that is truly mine. I found it 3 years ago. It was a mess when I moved in. The walls were a sickly yellow. The floors were scratched. But it had big windows and it was in the city, far away from the suburbs where my parents lived. I fixed it up myself. I sanded the floors on my hands and knees until my knuckles bled. I painted the walls a soft, creamy white. I bought plants, ferns, succulents, and a big fig tree in the corner. I made it a sanctuary. My parents hated it. "It's too small," my father said when he visited. "It's too far away," my mother complained. "It's boring," Chloe said. "There's no color. It looks like a dentist's waiting room." They insulted it, but they loved to use it. When they came into the city for shopping, they would dump their bags in my living room. They would use my bathroom and use all my expensive hand soap. They would drink my coffee and complain that I didn't have the right kind of sugar. They treated my home like a public rest stop. But lately, something had changed. Chloe had decided she wanted to be an influencer. She spent all day making videos on her phone. She talked about aesthetic and lifestyle. She started complaining that her bedroom in my parents' house was ugly and uncool. She started making comments about my apartment. "The light in here is actually really good," she said one day, looking around my living room like she was measuring it. "Yeah," she said to my mother, "I could film really good content here." I didn't think much of it at the time. I just thought she was being Chloe, jealous of anything that wasn't hers. I didn't know that she was planting seeds. I didn't know that while I was busy working and paying bills and being the good daughter, they were looking at my life and wondering how to carve it up and serve it to her. I was the daughter they used. I was the safety net. But I was about to find out that a safety net is only useful until you decide you want to fly. And they had decided Chloe was ready to fly, and I was just in the way. It happened on a Sunday. Sunday was mandatory family dinner. It was a ritual I dreaded all week. My stomach would start to hurt on Saturday night. By Sunday afternoon, I would have a tension headache throbbing behind my eyes. But I went. I always went. Because if I didn't, my mother would call me 10 times. She would leave voicemails saying, "We miss you. Why do you hate us? Are you too good for your family now?" It was easier to go and suffer for 3 hours than to deal with the fallout of saying no. That Sunday, I finished work early. I had a big project I had wrapped up on Friday, so I didn't have to go into the office. I decided to drive over to my parents' house a little early. I thought maybe, if I helped my mom cook, she would be nice to me. I thought maybe we could have a normal conversation before Chloe woke up and took over the room. I parked my car down the street. The driveway was full because my aunt was visiting for the weekend, and her big SUV took up 2 spots. I walked up the sidewalk. The leaves were turning brown and crunching under my boots. It was a cold, gray afternoon. The front door was unlocked. It always was. My parents lived in a safe, quiet neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened, at least, nothing bad that you could see from the street. I opened the door quietly. I didn't mean to sneak in. I just didn't want to slam it. I stepped into the hallway. The house smelled like roast beef and onions. It was a heavy, suffocating smell. I was taking off my coat when I heard them. They were in the kitchen. My mother, my father, and Chloe. They were laughing. It wasn't a nice laugh. It wasn't the sound of a family enjoying a joke. It was a scheming laugh. It was the sound of people who think they have gotten away with something clever. I froze. My hand stopped halfway to the coat rack. A feeling of cold dread washed over me. "It's honestly perfect, Mom," Chloe said. Her voice was loud and excited. "The location is exactly what I need. It's right near the boutiques. I can walk to the gym. And the brick wall in the living room. It's going to look so good as a background for my videos. I'm going to go viral." My heart skipped a beat. Brick wall. My apartment had a brick wall. It was one of the reasons I rented it. "I know, baby," my mother said. Her voice was dripping with that sugary affection she only ever used for Chloe. "You deserve it. You've been so unhappy here in the suburbs. You're a city girl. You need to be where the action is." "But Mom," Chloe whined slightly. "What if she says no? You know how she is about her stuff. She's so uptight." "Don't worry about Grace," my mother said. The way she said my name made me feel sick. She said it with such dismissal, like I was a fly she was swatting away. "Grace will do what I tell her to do. She always does." I stood in the hallway, unable to breathe. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. "But Frank is worried," my mother continued. "Aren't you, Frank?" "I just don't think it's right, Martha," my father said. His voice was low and weak. "It's her apartment. She pays for it. She's lived there for 3 years." "So what?" my mother snapped. "We helped her with the deposit, didn't we? Technically, that makes it a family investment. We have rights to it. And besides, look at her life, Frank. What does she do? She goes to work, she comes home, she reads books, she's boring. She's boring, the word hung in the air like smoke. Grace doesn't need a two-bedroom apartment in the city, my mother went on. She's alone, she's single. She's not doing anything with her life. Chloe has potential, Chloe is going places. Chloe needs that apartment to launch her career. Grace is just taking up space. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and stinging. Is that what I was to them? A waste of space. We'll just tell her that we're struggling with money, my mother said, plotting my destruction as casually as she chopped vegetables. I'll tell her that we might lose the house if we don't rent out her old room here. I'll cry a little bit. She can't stand seeing me cry. She'll panic. She'll offer to move back home to save us. It's a win-win. She saves money, we get her under our roof where we can keep an eye on her, and Chloe gets the city apartment. But the lease, my father said, doesn't it expire soon? Next week, my mother said triumphantly. I checked her mail when I was over there last Tuesday. The renewal notice was on the counter. She hasn't signed it yet. She's probably waiting until the last minute like she always does. She had gone through my mail. She had violated my privacy. So here is the plan, my mother said. I'm going to call the landlord tomorrow. I'll pretend to be Grace. I have all her information. I'll tell him that I'm not renewing, but that my sister Chloe is going to take over the lease. He won't care as long as the check clears. By the time Grace finds out the paperwork will be done, she'll have no choice but to pack up and come here. I love you, Mom, Chloe squealed. You're the best. I know, my mother said. And don't worry about Grace. She doesn't need boundaries, Frank. She needs direction. We are doing her a favor. She's lonely. She needs to be back with her family. I didn't hear anything after that. The rushing sound of blood in my ears drowned them out. They weren't just asking me to move. They were stealing from me. They were impersonating me. They were planning to trick me, displace me, and force me back into my childhood bedroom so I could serve them until I died. They looked at my life, my quiet, peaceful, hard-won life, and they decided it was just raw material for Chloe to consume. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling violently. I wanted to march into that kitchen and scream. I wanted to break things. I wanted to hurt them the way they were hurting me. But then a strange calm washed over me. It was cold and hard, like steel. If I went in there now, I would just be the hysterical daughter. I would be the crazy one. My mother would gaslight me. She would say I misunderstood. She would say I was being dramatic. She would talk me out of my anger until I was apologizing to her. No, I couldn't win this with shouting. I had to win this with silence. I backed away slowly. I stepped carefully on the rug so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I reached the front door. I opened it and slipped out into the cold air. I walked back to my car. I got in and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, looking at the house. It looked so warm and inviting from the outside. The lights were on. Smoke was coming from the chimney. It looked like a home, but it wasn't a home. It was a factory. And I was done being the product. I put the car in gear and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. The good daughter died in that hallway, and the woman who drove away was someone they had never met before. The drive back to the city felt different than any drive I had ever taken. Usually when I left my parents' house, I was crying. Usually I was filled with doubt. I would replay every conversation in my head, wondering what I had done wrong. Did I say the wrong thing? Did I not smile enough? Why are they mad at me? But this time there were no tears. My eyes were dry. My hands on the steering wheel were steady. I turned the radio off. I needed silence. I needed to hear my own thoughts. For 28 years, I had listened to their thoughts. I had let their voices drown out my own. My mother's voice telling me I was selfish. My father's voice telling me to keep the peace. Chloe's voice telling me I was boring. But as I drove down the highway, watching the city skyline get closer, those voices started to fade. They were replaced by a new voice. A quiet, angry voice. They don't love you, the voice said. They use you. It was a hard truth. It tasted bitter, like aspirins dissolved in water. But I swallowed it. I had to, because if I didn't accept that truth, I would lose everything. I pulled into the parking garage of my building. I parked in my spot 4 billion. I paid for this spot. I worked late nights and weekends to afford this spot. I took the elevator up. When I unlocked my door and stepped inside, the apartment felt different. Before, it was just a place to live. Now, it was a battlefield. I walked to the center of the living room. I looked at the brick wall, the one Chloe wanted to use for her videos. I looked at the gray rug, the one she wanted to throw in the trash. I looked at my kitchen, where I made my coffee every morning in peace. They wanted to take this. They wanted to erase me from my own home. They wanted to pack my life into boxes and shove me back into a child's bedroom in the suburbs, just so Chloe could play city girl for a few months until she got bored. My mother had said she doesn't need boundaries. She needs direction. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. It was rage, pure white-hot rage. I have direction, I said out loud. My voice echoed off the walls. My direction is away from you. I didn't sit down. I didn't take off my shoes. I went straight to my bedroom. My mother mocked me for being organized. She called me uptight because I kept my papers in order. She called me boring because I filed my bills instead of throwing them in a drawer. But right now, being boring was going to save my life. I opened the bottom drawer of my metal filing cabinet. I pulled out the blue hanging folder labeled Housing Lease Legal. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened the folder. There it was, the original lease agreement I had signed 3 years ago. I remembered that day. I remembered sitting in Mr. Henderson's office. Mr. Henderson was an older man, very grumpy and suspicious. He had just evicted a tenant who had destroyed the apartment, punched holes in the walls, stained the carpets, broken the windows. Mr. Henderson had been hesitant to rent to me. "You're young," he had said. "Young people are loud. Young people have parties." "I don't have parties," I had told him. "I work, I read, I sleep. I want a home, not a club." He had watched me carefully. He checked my credit score. It was perfect. He checked my employment history. It was solid. Eventually, he agreed. And because he wanted stability, because he didn't want to have to find a new tenant every year, he had added a special clause to the contract. My mother was right about one thing. The current lease term was ending in 7 days. If I did nothing, the contract would expire. But she didn't know about the fine print. She didn't know about the conversation I had with Mr. Henderson 3 years ago. I flipped through the pages. Page 1, page 2. Page 3, my finger traced the small, black text. And then I found it. Clause 22, renewal option. The text was simple. It wasn't written in confusing legal jargon. It was direct. The tenant, Grace Miller, retains the exclusive right of first refusal to renew this lease agreement for an additional term of up to 36 months, 3 years. This option must be exercised in writing prior to the expiration date of the current term. The landlord agrees that the rent shall not increase by more than 2% per annum during this renewal term. I read it again. Exclusive right. That meant Mr. Henderson couldn't say no. That meant my mother couldn't outbid me. That meant that as long as I signed a piece of paper and handed him a check before next Sunday, this apartment was mine. Mine, not Chloe's, not my parents'. Mine. I sat back against the bed. I held the paper to my chest. My mother had built her entire plan on an assumption. She assumed I was lazy. She assumed I hadn't read my own contract. She assumed she could trick the landlord because she thought she was smarter than everyone else. She was wrong. I looked around my bedroom. For the first time in hours, my heart rate slowed down. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the soft sister, the one who cried, the one who folded, but they forgot something. You don't get strong by being protected. You get strong by carrying heavy things. I had carried their emotional baggage for 10 years. I had carried their secrets. I had carried their debts. I was stronger than they could ever imagine because they were the ones who put the weight on my shoulders. I stood up. I placed the lease on my desk. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. My skin was pale. My eyes were red from the stress. But there was something else in my eyes, a sharpness, a clarity. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a strategist. I washed my face with cold water. I brushed my hair. I walked back into the living room and looked out the window at the city lights. My mother was probably at home right now, laughing with Chloe. They were probably looking at furniture online, picking out things for my apartment. They were probably feeling so smug, so victorious. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them plan. Tomorrow, the world was going to flip upside down. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the couch I bought with my own bonus check, and I started to make a list. I didn't write it down. I wrote it in my head. Secure the home, secure the law, secure the evidence, cut the cord. I took a sip of tea. It was hot and comforting. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. I didn't need an alarm. My body was humming with adrenaline. I called my boss at 8 a.m. "I need to take a personal day," I said. "Is everything okay, Grace?" she asked. She sounded worried. I never took days off. "Yes," I said. "I just have some urgent family business to attend to." It wasn't a lie. It was business. and it was about to be very urgent for my family. I dressed carefully. I wore my best blazer, the black one that made me feel powerful. I put on my heels. I wasn't dressing for a lazy day at home. I was dressing for war. At 9 a.m., I walked into the rental management office on the first floor. Mr. Henderson was there, sitting behind his desk, eating a donut. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Grace," he said, wiping sugar off his lip. "Sink leaking again." "No, Mr. Henderson," I said. I sat down in the chair opposite him. I placed my copy of the lease on his desk. "I'm here to exercise my option under Clause 22. He looked at the paper, then at me. "The renewal?" "Yes," I said. "I want to renew for the full 3 years." He raised his eyebrows. "3 years, you sure? Most young folks your age want to move around, get married, buy a house." "I am very sure," I said. "This is my home, I am not moving." "Well," he said, shrugging, "you're the best tenant I've got. The rent is always on time. The place is clean, I'd be happy to keep you." He pulled out a form from his drawer. "Standard renewal agreement. Same terms with the 2% adjustment we agreed on." I signed the paper. My hand didn't shake. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page. Grace Miller. It looked like a signature on a Declaration of Independence. I wrote him a check for the renewal fee. He stamped the document, paid, and executed. "Can I have a photocopy of that right now?" I asked. "With the date stamp?" "Sure thing," he said. He handed me the copy. I held it in my hands. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt heavier than steel. It was a shield. It was a wall. "One more thing, Mr. Henderson," I said. "My mother, she might call you." He frowned. "Your mother?" "Yes," I said. "She has some confusion about my living situation. If she calls, or if anyone calls claiming to be me, please know that I have not authorized anyone else to speak for me. I am the only tenant." Mr. Henderson looked at me over his glasses. He was a grumpy man, but he wasn't stupid. He saw the tension in my jaw. "I only talked to the person on the lease," he grunted. "And that's you, don't worry." "Thank you," I said. Step 1 was done. The fortress was secure. I walked out of the office and got into my car. I drove to a law firm downtown. My friend Marcus worked there. We had gone to college together. Marcus was the opposite of me. He was loud, opinionated, and tough. He had been telling me for years that my family was toxic. I had never listened. I had always defended them. "They just love me too much," I used to say. "They don't mean it," I used to say. Today, I was done making excuses. I walked into his office. He looked up from his computer. "Grace," he said, "what are you doing here? You look intense." "I need a favor," I said. "A legal one." I told him everything. I told him about the conversation I overheard. I told him about their plan to impersonate me. I told him about the direction my mother thought I needed. Marcus listened. He didn't interrupt. But I saw his face getting darker and darker. His jaw tightened. When I finished, he slammed his hand on the desk. "That is incredible," he said. "I knew they were bad, Grace, but this is fraud. This is conspiracy." "I know," I said. "I'm not here to sue them, not yet. I just want to make sure they can't stay." "You want a trespassing notice," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "I want a formal letter, legal letterhead, big words. I want them to know that if they refuse to leave my apartment, the police will be involved." "I'll do it right now," Marcus said. He started typing furiously. "I'm going to cite the penal code. I'm going to make it scary. They need to be scared, Grace. People like that only respect power." 10 minutes later, I walked out with a sealed envelope. Inside was a notice to cease and desist and notice against trespassing. It was addressed to my parents and my sister. Step 2 was done. I had the law on my side. I drove to the electronics store. I walked down the aisle with the security cameras. I didn't want a tiny spy camera. I didn't want to hide. I wanted them to know I was watching. I bought a camera that mounted on the wall. It had a microphone. It had a motion sensor. And most importantly, it had a bright red light that blinked when it was recording. I drove home and installed it immediately. I put it right inside the entryway at eye level. I connected it to my phone. I walked outside into the hall and then walked back in. My phone buzzed. Motion detected, front door. I looked at the video clip. The picture was crisp. The audio was clear. If my mother lied, the camera would catch it. If Chloe screamed, the camera would hear it. If they tried to manipulate the truth later, I would have the file. Step 3 was done. I had the evidence. Now came the hardest part. The emotional part. I looked around my apartment. I saw the few things my family had given me over the years. There was a lamp in the corner. My mother had bought it at a garage sale for $5. She gave it to me for my birthday 3 years ago. It's vintage, she had said. It was ugly and the switch was broken, but I had kept it because I felt guilty throwing it away. There was a blender in the kitchen. Chloe gave it to me for Christmas. The box had been opened. It still had smoothie residue inside it when I unwrapped it. She had used it for a month, got bored of it, and wrapped it up for me. There were some old towels in the closet. My parents had bought new, fluffy towels for themselves and gave me their old, scratchy ones. These are still good, my dad had said. Don't be wasteful. I grabbed a cardboard box from my closet. I unplugged the lamp and put it in the box. I put the dirty blender in the box. I put the scratchy towels in the box. I walked around the apartment, searching for anything else. A framed photo of the family where I was standing in the back, half hidden. A cheap scarf my aunt had left behind that my mother told me to keep. I packed it all. These weren't gifts. They were scraps. They were the leftovers of their lives that they handed down to me because they didn't think I deserved anything new. I carried the box down to my car. It was heavy, but my heart felt lighter with every step. I drove to my parents' house. I knew they were at work. Chloe was probably out shopping or getting her nails done. I pulled into the driveway. I walked up to the front porch. I set the box down right in front of the door. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. The message was clear. I am returning your garbage. I don't want your leftovers anymore. I got back in my car and drove away. I went back to my apartment. I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I sat on my couch. The apartment was quiet. The sun was starting to go down, casting long shadows across the floor. I checked my phone. It was 4:30 p.m. My mother had texted me again. Almost there. Get ready. I looked at the text and felt nothing. No panic, no fear, no guilt. I was a spider sitting in the center of her web. I had built the web strong. I had reinforced the silk. They were coming to destroy me, but they didn't know that I had spent the last 24 hours turning my home into a fortress. I poured myself a glass of water. I set it on the coaster. I watched the red light on the camera blink. Blink, blink, blink. Come on, I whispered. I was ready for them. The key turned in the lock at 5:15 p.m. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one facing the door. My laptop was open on my lap, but the screen was dark. My hands were folded calmly on the keyboard. I had practiced my breathing for the last hour. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4, out for 4. The door swung open with force. My mother didn't just open doors, she conquered them. She strode in, bringing a gust of cold air and her overpowering perfume with her. Chloe was right behind her, dragging 2 massive pink suitcases. The wheels rumbled loudly over the threshold and onto my wood floor. They were beaming. It was sickening. They looked like tourists arriving at a resort. Surprise, my mother yelled, throwing her arms out wide. She waited for my reaction. She expected confusion, then compliance. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just looked at them. Hello, Mother, I said. My voice was flat. Hello, Chloe. Chloe didn't even look at me. She dropped the suitcase handle and immediately walked toward the kitchen. Grace, why is the counter so cluttered? We're going to need to clear all this out. I have my espresso machine coming tomorrow. She was already moving in. She hadn't even asked. She was rearranging my life in her head before she had even taken off her coat. My mother walked toward me, her smile faltering just a little at my lack of enthusiasm. Oh, stop being so gloomy, Grace. We have wonderful news. Amazing news. She sat down on my coffee table, right in front of me, invading my personal space. She put a hand on my knee. I resisted the urge to flinch. We've been thinking, she started, using her caring mother voice. It was a performance. You've been working so hard. You look tired, honey, really tired. And we realized. You need a break, you need to come home. Home, I asked. I am home. No, silly, she laughed, waving her hand dismissively. I mean real home with us. We miss you. And this city life, it's so stressful, so expensive. Daddy and I decided we want you to move back into your old room for a while. Save some money. Eat my cooking. She paused for effect. And since the apartment will be empty, Chloe is going to take it over, just for a while. To help her get started. It's perfect, Chloe called from the kitchen. She was opening my cabinets now. Grace, do you seriously not have oat milk? Whatever, I'll buy my own. My mother squeezed my knee. See, it works out for everyone. You get to be taken care of, and Chloe gets a chance to shine. We'll help you pack this weekend. You can be out by the 1st of the month. It wasn't a question. It was a command wrapped in fake concern. I looked at my mother's hand on my knee. Then I looked at her face. I saw the manipulation in her eyes. She wasn't worried about me being tired, she just wanted my apartment. No, I said. The room went silent. My mother blinked. What? No, I repeated. I am not moving out, I am not tired, and Chloe is not taking my apartment. My mother's face changed instantly. The warmth evaporated. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Excuse me, I don't think you understand, Grace. We aren't asking, we need this to happen. Your father and I have decided. You don't get to decide, I said. You don't live here. Chloe walked back into the living room, looking annoyed. Mom, tell her to stop being selfish. I already told my followers I'm moving to the city. I can't look like a liar. Grace, my mother said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low tone. Don't be difficult. After everything we've done for you, we helped you get this place. We are your family, you owe us. I owe you nothing, I said calmly. You ungrateful little, my mother stood up, her face flushing red. This apartment is basically ours. We paid the deposit. You paid $500 5 years ago, I said. I have paid $60,000 in rent since then. It doesn't matter, she shouted. The lease is up next week, we know. I called the landlord weeks ago pretending to be you to ask about the date. We know it expires, and you are not renewing it. We are putting it in Chloe's name. She admitted it. She admitted the fraud. Actually, I said, reaching for the folder on the side table. That's where you're wrong. I picked up the folder. I didn't open it yet, I just held it. Chloe, I said, looking at my sister. Don't unpack that bag. Shut up, Grace, Chloe sneered. Mom said I can have the room. Go pack your boring clothes. My mother stepped closer, looming over me. You will do what you are told, Grace. Or so help me God, you won't be welcome in this family anymore. I looked at the camera by the door. The little red light blinked steadily. Blink, blink, blink. They had walked right into the spider's web. Are you done? I asked. My mother looked confused by my tone. She expected tears. She expected me to crumble. She didn't know how to handle this version of me. I said, I stood up slowly, matching her height. Are you done shouting in my home? Your home, she laughed, a harsh, barking sound. It's practically Chloe's home now. I opened the folder. I pulled out the crisp, white paper with the blue ink signature at the bottom. I held it up so they could both see it. This, I said, my voice steady and clear, is a lease renewal agreement. My mother squinted at it. Chloe stopped chewing her gum. I signed it yesterday morning, I continued. Mr. Henderson countersigned it. I exercised my option under Clause 22. This apartment is legally leased to me, Grace Miller, for the next 3 years. The rent is paid. The contract is binding. I let the paper lower, but I didn't put it down. So, I said, the lease is not expiring next week. It is not available for Chloe. It is mine, and I am not moving. My mother froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. The narrative she had built, the one where she snapped her fingers and I obeyed, had just shattered against the wall of legal reality. You what? She whispered. I renewed it, I said, for 3 years. You lying bitch, Chloe screamed. She lunged forward, her face twisted in a tantrum. You knew I wanted it. You did this on purpose. Yes, I said, I did. How dare you, my mother shrieked. The fake sweetness was entirely gone now. She was a monster. How dare you go behind my back? I am your mother. I told you what the plan was. I overheard your plan, I said. On Sunday. I heard you tell Dad that I didn't need boundaries, I needed direction. I heard you say I was boring and that I'd just get over it. My mother's face went pale. She realized I knew everything. So, I continued. I decided to give myself some direction. The direction is staying right here. I will call the landlord, my mother threatened. I will tell him you're unstable. I will tell him to cancel it. You can try, I said, but he knows me. He likes me, and unlike you, I actually pay my bills. I need this apartment, Chloe yelled. She was crying now, big, angry, ugly tears. My career depends on it. I can't live in the suburbs anymore. I'm an influencer. I need the city aesthetic. Then get a job and rent one, I said, like I did. Mom, Chloe wailed, turning to her protector. Fix it, make her leave. My mother turned her fury on me. Her eyes were cold, filled with a hatred I had never wanted to see but always suspected was there. You are selfish, she hissed. You are a selfish, jealous girl. You have always been jealous of Chloe because she shines and you don't. You are trying to sabotage your sister because you are bitter. I am not jealous, I said. I am just tired of being used. If you don't cancel that lease, my mother said, stepping closer, her finger pointing in my face, If you don't call him right now and tell him it was a mistake. We are done, do you hear me? Dad and I will cut you off. No more family dinners, no more Christmas, you will be alone. It was the ultimate threat. The weapon she had used to control me my whole life. The fear of abandonment. But standing there, looking at her contorted face, looking at Chloe's childish tantrum, I realized something. I was already alone. Even when I was with them, I was alone. I was a servant, not a member. Okay, I said. My mother blinked. Okay, you'll do it. No, I said. I mean, okay, cut me off. The silence that followed was deafening. What? She whispered. I accept your terms, I said. If the price of being in this family is letting you abuse me and steal my home, then I don't want to be in the family anymore. I walked over to the side table and picked up the second document Marcus had prepared. This is a formal notice of trespassing, I said. Trespassing? My mother laughed nervously. Don't be ridiculous, we are family. Not anymore, I said. You just cut me off, remember? So now you are strangers in my home. Strangers who are yelling and refusing to leave. I pointed to the camera by the door. That camera has been recording everything since you walked in, I said. It has audio and video. It recorded you admitting to fraud. It recorded you threatening me, and it is recording you right now refusing to leave after the leaseholder asked you to. They both whipped their heads around to look at the blinking red light. You recorded us, my mother gasped. She looked horrified, not because of what she did, but because she had been caught doing it. Yes, I said, and if you don't take those suitcases and walk out that door in the next 2 minutes, I will send the footage to the police. And Chloe, I looked at my sister. I will post it online. I think your followers would love to see the real aesthetic of your family. Chloe turned white. Her reputation was the only thing she cared about. Mom, Chloe whispered, tugging on my mother's sleeve. Mom, the camera, let's go. My mother looked at me one last time. She looked for the scared little girl she used to bully. She looked for the daughter who needed her approval. She didn't find her. The power dynamic in the room shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure change. Minutes ago, they were the conquerors, marching in to claim their territory. Now, they were the intruders, scrambling to retreat. My mother's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, rage, disbelief, and finally, fear. She realized I wasn't bluffing. She realized that for the first time in 28 years, she had absolutely no leverage over me. You would do that? She asked quietly. You would humiliate your own sister online. You were ready to make me homeless, I replied. I am just protecting myself. I am your mother, she said, her voice trembling. It was a last-ditch effort to pull the guilt string. Then act like one, I said. She stared at me for a long moment. I held her gaze. I didn't look down. I didn't apologize. Fine, she spat. The venom was back. Fine. Have your stupid apartment. Keep your miserable little life. But don't come crawling back to us when you realize nobody else wants you. I won't, I said. She turned around sharply, her coat whipping the air. Chloe, grab your things. Chloe looked at me with pure hatred. I hate you, she hissed. You ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I said calmly. I just stopped you from stealing. Chloe grabbed the handles of her suitcases. She yanked them so hard one of them tipped over. She had to struggle to right it, looking clumsy and foolish. There was no grace in their exit. They marched toward the door. My mother paused with her hand on the knob. She looked back at the apartment, at the high ceilings, the light, the life she wanted to snatch for her favorite child. You're a cold-hearted girl, Grace, she said. I don't know where you came from. I came from you, I said. I learned how to survive from you. She slammed the door. The sound echoed through the apartment, then silence. I stood there for a long time. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me feeling lightheaded and dizzy. I walked over to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Click. Then the chain lock, slide. I went to the window. I peeked through the blinds. I saw them down on the street. My mother was gesturing wildly, yelling at Chloe. Chloe was crying, kicking the tire of their car. They looked chaotic. They looked miserable. They got into the car and drove away. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for days. I walked into the kitchen. I saw the cabinet door Chloe had left open. I closed it gently. I saw the rug my mother had walked on with her shoes. I would vacuum it later. I was alone. But it wasn't the lonely feeling my mother had predicted. It wasn't cold. It wasn't scary. It felt spacious. The air in the apartment felt cleaner. The heavy weight of expectation, the constant anxiety of what will they want next, was gone. I realized they were right about one thing. I was boring to them, because I didn't provide drama. I provided stability, and they hated that I used that stability for myself instead of them. I went to the fridge and poured myself a glass of cold water. I drank it standing in the middle of my kitchen. My phone started buzzing on the counter. Incoming call. Dad, I looked at the screen. My father, the enabler. The one who watched them plan my eviction and said nothing. The one who stood by while I was treated like a servant. He was probably calling to guilt me, to tell me I had upset Mother, to ask me to apologize and fix it like I always did. I watched the phone vibrate. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I didn't pick it up. I didn't decline it either. I just let it ring until it stopped. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I went into my contacts. Mother, block contact. Chloe, block contact. Dad, block contact. I put the phone down. The silence returned. And this time it sounded like music. The next few weeks were strange. It was like learning to walk again after having a cast removed. My leg was weak, but it was free. I kept expecting the other shoe to drop. I kept expecting the police to show up, or Mr. Henderson to change his mind, or my family to appear on my doorstep with a battering ram. But they didn't. The trespass notice Marcus had sent them by certified mail probably helped. He told me he included a cover letter explaining the legal consequences of harassment. He said my mother had called his office screaming, but he simply hung up. The silence from them was absolute. And in that silence, I began to heal. I realized how much energy I had spent managing their emotions. Every day, a percentage of my brain power had been dedicated to anticipating family crises. Is Mom angry today? Does Chloe need money? Did I remember Dad's birthday? Now that processing power was free. I started sleeping better. The chronic tension headaches I used to get every Sunday afternoon disappeared. I looked at my apartment differently. Before it was a hiding place. Now it was a fortress. It was a kingdom. One evening I was watering my tomato plants on the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the city skyline in shades of purple and gold. I heard a knock at the door. My stomach clenched. Old habits die hard. Was it them? I checked the camera monitor. It was a delivery driver. I laughed out loud. A genuine belly laugh. I opened the door and took the package, a new set of velvet throw pillows I had ordered. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted them. Because they were blue and my mother hated blue. I sat on my couch with my new pillows. I thought about Chloe. I wondered where she was. Probably still in her old bedroom, complaining about the lighting. Probably making videos about how hard her life was. I didn't hate her. I realized that, surprisingly. I didn't hate my mother either. I pitied them. They were trapped in a cycle of need and manipulation. They were like buckets with holes in the bottom. No matter how much love or money or help you poured in, they would never be full. They would always be empty and demanding more. I had stepped out of the bucket. I was no longer the water. I was solid. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop. I had been thinking about taking a course in UX design. I had put it off for 2 years because it was expensive and I needed to save for family emergencies. I logged onto the website. The tuition was $3,000. I checked my bank account. The money was there. The money I hadn't spent on Chloe's car repairs. The money I hadn't loaned to my mother. I clicked enroll. I felt a rush of excitement. It was the first decision I had made purely for myself in a decade. I wasn't a daughter anymore. Not in the way they defined it. I was just Grace. And for the first time, Grace was enough. 3 months passed. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was walking home from work, holding a red umbrella. I turned the corner onto my street and saw a familiar car parked across from my building. It was my father's sedan. I stopped. My heart did a little flutter, but it wasn't the panic of before. It was just caution. My father was standing by the car under a black umbrella. He looked older, more tired. He saw me. He took a step forward, then stopped. He didn't come to the door. He respected the boundary, or maybe he was just afraid of the camera. I stood there on the sidewalk, 20 feet away from him. Grace, he called out. His voice was swallowed by the rain. I didn't move closer. Hello, Dad. Your mother misses you, he said. It was the script, always the script. No, she doesn't, I said. She misses the control. He looked down at his shoes. He knew I was right. He was a weak man, but not a stupid one. She's having a hard time, he said. Chloe is. Difficult to live with. I almost smiled. Of course she was. Without me there to absorb the toxicity, they were turning on each other. The dynamic had shifted. Now they had to deal with the monster they had created. That's not my problem anymore, Dad, I said. We just want you to come for dinner, he pleaded. Just one dinner to talk. I looked at him. I remembered the man who taught me to ride a bike. But I also remembered the man who sat at the kitchen table while his wife planned to make me homeless. I can't, I said. Why? He asked. Are you still punishing us? No, I said gently. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. He looked at me, really looked at me through the rain. He saw the new coat I was wearing. He saw the way I stood, straight, not hunched over. He saw that I wasn't looking for his permission. You're not coming back, are you? He asked softly. No, I said, I'm not. He nodded slowly. He looked sad but resigned. He got back in his car. He didn't wave. He just drove away. I watched the taillights fade into the gray mist. It was the final cord being cut. It hurt, just a little, a small, sharp pinch. But then it was gone. I turned and walked into my building. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. I walked down the hallway. I reached my door. Apartment 4 billion. My name was on the little label on the buzzer, Grace Miller. I unlocked the door. I stepped inside. It was warm. It smelled of vanilla and old books. The camera light blinked a friendly greeting. I took off my wet coat. I kicked off my shoes. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights were coming on, thousands of little beacons in the dark. I thought about the lease in the filing cabinet. 3 years of peace. 3 years of my own money. 3 years of Sunday evenings spent reading instead of being insulted. I touched the cold glass of the window. I don't belong to you anymore, I whispered to the rain, to the car that had driven away, to the ghosts of my family. I belong to me. I turned away from the window and walked into my kitchen to make dinner, just for one, and it was going to be delicious.